will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Next, staff will present the report. We will then ask public comment. Please state and spell your name clearly. If you are here to speak for or against the project, your time will be limited to 3 minutes. So take some time now to summarize your comments because 3 minutes goes by very quickly. The commissioners will then ask questions of the applicant and staff. Next, the applicant will have 5 minutes for a rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. After the public hearing is closed, no further testimony can be given. The commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based on Chapter 27 of the City Code of Ordinances. Research and reports provided by the administrator, staff, and qualified professionals, then the testimony given at the public hearing. If you have not already done so, please silence your cell phones. And I'd like to introduce the members of the commission starting to my right.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Sutton. I am a registered architect. I also hold the architectural historian chair for this commission.
Susan Swift, I'm a planner.
Stephanie McQueen, urban planner.
Laura Harrison, archaeologist.
Okay. And I would like to introduce the staff. We have Dennis Fernandez. We have Elaine Lund, Jared Vernum, and our attorney, Camaria Pettis-Mackel. Now we're going to do the reading of the minutes from January 20th, 2026. I don't know if everybody had a chance to review it. Are we good? Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to accept the minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Anybody second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimous. And then we'll go on to Dennis.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architectural Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Welcome to this morning's hearing. I did want to begin with an overview of a recent project that was completed in Ybor City. It's one of our longtime initiatives that we're finally seeing some momentum on. It is the rebricking of 7th Avenue. 7th Avenue is, of course, our historic commercial gateway through the Ybor City Historic District, and essentially constitutes between generally Nucio Parkway and 26th Avenue, or street, excuse me. So there's been a discussion for many years about undoing the pavement that was placed there in the 50s and 60s and has been sustained as asphalt through that time, and bringing back the original historic brick that I think everybody's familiar with from maybe other locations. There was a project about 18 months ago that did the first sections of brick between 15th and 17th Streets, and recently we completed the second phase between 17th and 19th Streets. Just go to the Wolf. Here we go. So on your monitor, you see the map of the Ybor City Historic District with 7th Avenue highlighted with the red arrows. So early in Ybor City's history, the roads were sandy dirt, which was not easy for most means of transportation to traverse. Bricks were laid on the Ybor streets beginning in the late 1890s through the early part of the 20th century. Later, the bricks were removed from 7th Avenue in the 50s, and the streetscape continued to change with urban renewal. One reason for the change that was cited was many suppliers of brick pavers had gone out of business, resulting in a shortage, and asphalt presented a less expensive, durable alternative at the time. 15th to 17th Street, which is essentially this section right here, was completed in 2024. This property has been being funded through community redevelopment area funds and as approved through the CRA and council acting as a CRA board. Phases between, phase 2 included the area between 17th and 19th Streets with the exception of the intersections. The intersections had to be engineered, so we had to do that separately. And over 140,000 bricks have been laid thus far in this project.
One moment, we don't have it up on our screens here, or do we not? Now we do, okay.
Okay. See some of the images from the most recent completed span. As I said, this takes large quantities of brick. Most of this brick is not in a centralized location, so it has to be acquired, and that's why the project is happening in phases. In this particular section, we were diligent about finding a limited inventory of the manufactured brick in order to get a more consistent surface and have it be rideable. So it's always going to be somewhat traffic calming with brick, but we wanted it to be as smooth as feasible. As you can see, the red bricking enhances the character and feel of the historic district and also provides a natural traffic calming and promotes walkability. We got many much positive feedback with this project as it was going, both from the city's implementation as well as the contractor selection. They finished ahead of time and on budget, which is a good project. The next phase, the third phase, will feature intersections at 17th, 18th, and then the span between 18th and 19th. So we'll have essentially about half the project completed after that phase. And there will be some additional engineering that's going to occur at each intersection to ensure stormwater runoff, ADA compliance, and pedestrian safety. So, we're working with those different departments to ensure that not only is the aesthetic improved, but the functionality of the roadway is also improved. And that concludes my briefing. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. So next, I did want to just call to attention. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I did a little self-guided walking tour recently, and it makes such a big difference. It looks really good.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely, like we said, it enhances the character, so definitely adds to the environment on 7th Avenue. Next, we wanted to jump into our preservation in progress, our reoccurring look at preservation in the city of Tampa and projects that are really worthy of being focused upon. This month, we're focusing on the Tampa Theater as it celebrates its 100th year. And as such, Elaine is going to provide an overview of the work that's underway currently with the theater. Elaine?
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff. If we can move to the PowerPoint presentation. We're looking at the Tampa Theater and Office Building at 707 to 711 North Franklin Street. This is a local historic landmark. Is that up on your screens? Okay, wonderful. So the Tampa Theater and Office Building is located in downtown Tampa between Franklin and Florida Avenue and between Zack and Polk Streets, with Polk Street being on the north, Franklin Street being on the west, Zack on the south, Florida Avenue on the east. Currently, the Tampa Theater and Office Building is undergoing a restoration project to fully restore the theater in time for its 100th anniversary in October. This is the, there we are, 1931 Sanborn map showing the 10-story office building on the left or the west side, the Franklin Street side, and the connected auditorium. The construction notes on the Sanborn map, because these maps were done for fire insurance purposes, shows that it was built of steel frame with concrete floors and roofs and tile curtain walls. The building was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1978, and it was one of the first buildings listed as a local historic landmark by the city of Tampa when the citywide historic preservation ordinance was enacted. The designated local landmark site shown here indicates the theater lobby with the entrance off Franklin Street and the first floor of the 10-story office building, and the auditorium at the corner of Florida Avenue and Polk Street. Construction of the Tampa Theater and Office Building began in late 1925. John Eberson of Chicago was the architect. He designed over 100, possibly closer to 200 movie palaces throughout the United States and in other countries. R.E. Hall, an engineer and architect from New York, worked with Eberson on the Tampa Theater and other theaters of this era, including some in Miami. George Miller, a local Tampa builder, constructed the project. The theater opened on October 15, 1926. Here you can see the auditorium under construction in March of 1926, with the steel frame in place and the hollow clay tile for the curtain walls on site. The highly ornate Tampa Theater was designed in the Mediterranean Revival style, which was popular in the 1920s. This Mediterranean Revival style features an eclectic mix of details followed from countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea, including Spain, Italy, and Morocco. The 10-story office building has an asymmetrical facade with balconies, balustrades, finials, and terracotta accents. Most of the ornamentation on the building is seen at its base and on the upper stories. The marble and cast iron box office and main entrance, which remains in place, is opens to Franklin Street. And upon entry, an extended lobby leads to the theater, originally designed to hold 1,600 patrons. The interior is richly decorated with wrought iron lamps, carved wood chests and chairs, statuary, wall hangings, medallions and coats of arms, and paintings in the style of the old masters. Some of the furnishings chosen were genuine antiques, including Venetian lanterns and Spanish and Italian pottery. One of the major draws of the Tampa Theater was its cooling system, which also filtered and dehumidified the air. This allowed theater goers to sit in comfort in the atmospheric theater, which was designed to resemble an open courtyard surrounded by facades with arched galleries and balconies, featuring wrought iron grills, window grills and railings, and topped by tiled roofs with accents of exotic vegetation. The ceiling is designed to resemble the sky, with lighting that mimics the rising and setting sun and twinkling stars. The theater also has an orchestra pit that holds approximately 20 musicians and a Wurlitzer theater organ, which provided the scored music that accompanied silent films. The art in the theater proscenium includes reproductions of famous sculptures by Michelangelo and some from antiquity, such as the Venus of Ostia and figures from mythology. So the current work that's being done at the Tampa Theater was reviewed by the Architectural Review Commission for the exterior rehabilitation. which includes the masonry cleaning, sign repainting, and minor repairs. On the interior, the ARC typically does not review the interior work. However, it is notable that the theater is working with restoration companies who are highly experienced in working with this sort of historic finishes. The first floor offices in the Florida Avenue wing of the Tampa Theater are being renovated to facilitate a green room, a storage, restrooms, and a break room. In the theater, the pit below the stage will be structurally renovated and a new organ lift will be installed. The stage floor will be replaced and a new accessible access to the stage will be achieved with an operable lift. The second floor of the Franklin Street Tower will be converted into assembly space for exclusive events. The full and authentic restoration of paint and plaster will require that expert artists be able to access every square inch of the auditorium's ornate walls and its starry ceiling. So the first step was to fill the space with the multi-level scaffolding. This way, the Tampa Theater can fully restore the historic auditorium to its original grandeur. Some of the work includes simply plaster repair and painting. The building's infrastructure is being upgraded as well. So renovations to the theater will increase lighting levels in the lobby and stage areas with new mechanical and electrical equipment. To accommodate the theater's expanding education program, more than 3,000 square feet of underutilized office and storage space on the Florida Avenue side of the building is being remodeled to make way for the dedicated classrooms. And we have a little more about this project in this month's Tampa Bricks and Mortar newsletter, which I believe is in your packets today. And that concludes this preservation and progress presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Interestingly enough, the Tampa Theater was one of two of the first historic designations that were earned in the city of Tampa, the other being Tampa Union Station, and both properties are currently going through restoration. So it's good to see that investment going into these historically important assets that we have in our city. And I'm sure once these are done, be dramatic changes. I visited the Tampa Theater a couple times through this because you don't get to see these types of projects very often, and it's very interesting with the craftspeople that go in and do like just minute scratch tests to determine the correct color. And there was some deviation from the colors in the 80s to what the original colors were, so they're reversing that to ensure that all the colors are the original colors. And then there's a balance with these types of uses because they have to sustain the historic attributes of the theater, of course, to be responsible for its history, but also keep the technologies up to date to be competitive with the type of business that they're in. And John Bell, the executive director, does a fabulous job there. I enjoy working with him, and I've been consulting with him on this project throughout, as well as the Tampa Union Station project that's being executed by the city. So with that, go ahead and move on through the agenda if there's no questions. We have no continuations to act upon, so we'll just go to the swearing. I'm sorry. Skip Kamari's part. Conflicts of interest and ex parte communication. Our legal counsel will lead that discussion.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the Legal Department, City of Tampa. Will the Commissioners state whether or not they have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items that are on the agenda?
I have none.
I have none.
I have
None.
Thank you. Will the Commissioners please state whether or not they've had any ex parte communications regarding anything that's on the agenda?
None.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Kamaria. As I said, no continuation, so we are now ready for the swear-in. Anyone who's going to be providing testimony or presenting to the commission, if you could please stand and raise your right hand, including the staff.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony being provided today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. With that, we have our first item on the agenda. If you recall, when we met last, we were going through a somewhat of a conflict that we had on the map for Tampa Heights. Our maps are illustrative indicators of our historic resources inventory, so it's very important that they be accurate. And as some of the areas along the edge have been redeveloping lately, we've been noticing some problems with the way that the boundaries are drawn in the northwest corner of the Tampa Heights Historic District. So we made some suggestions last time and there was discussion, and since that time, the staff has been working on that to be able to bring this back to you for motion, and Elaine's going to be updating you on the progress to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff. So our update today is on the Tampa Heights Historic District map, including the boundaries and the inventory. To give you, let's see here, an overview of the area, Tampa Heights is just north of downtown and was established as an early suburb of Tampa in the late 1800s. This area is primarily residential with a few commercial corridors. It goes a little bit north of Florabraska Avenue up to Robles Park on the north side. The western boundary is generally Florida Avenue, although it's shown here in red. You can see that there are some areas where it extends over to Tampa Street. And on the east side, the boundary is Interstate 275, and on the south side, the boundary is 7th Avenue. There are a few outliers, little satellite properties on the west side there of the historic district. These are individually significant buildings that were found to be, through the years, contributing to the historic district, significant enough to contribute to the historic district, and had owners who opted into the designation process when the district was established. The period of significance for the Tampa Heights Historic District is pretty broad. It goes all the way from 1890 to 1945. The district was listed in the National Register in 1995, and the local historic district was designated by the city in 2000. At our last count, we had approximately 200 acres with over 500 buildings, and approximately 60% of those were contributing. There are some images here just showing you a historic picture and a contemporary picture. The district reflects a wide variety of architectural styles, from free classic Queen Anne to craftsman bungalows. So staff periodically updates our historic district maps to make sure the historic district maps reflect the current inventory. Our last map update was in 2017. Additionally, substantial redevelopment in the greater Tampa Heights community has added a number of new buildings. So you can see here in the image, this is a block of East Adderley Street on the north end of the Tampa Heights Historic District. And today there's 3 new buildings on the south side of that block and 1 on the north. So with the amount of new development in this area, there's definitely a need to update the inventory. So this year we're working on the field work necessary to make sure that we have all the inventory updates correct, including new construction, demolitions, and changes in status and relocations to make sure those are accurately reflected on our map. By my current count, we have about and these are estimates, approximately 50 new buildings, a couple of relocations, and a few demolitions on hand, mostly non-contributing structures, but there have been some unfortunate incidents with the hurricanes that we had in 2024 and a couple of fires that have resulted in the loss of approximately 5 or so contributing buildings. These numbers are estimates based on the city's GIS data, and we will be field verifying that as well. So when we come back to you with the final inventory, we will have solid, less approximate numbers for you. The image here is showing you one of the relocations that happened a few years back from 604 Francis to 602 Francis. This was necessary to relocate this building as part of the interchange expansion between Interstate 4 and Interstate 275. So the parcel that this house was on was owned by the Florida Department of Transportation. They offered the building for sale, and all the new owners had to do was pick it up and move it one parcel over. Sounds simple. This is a process that was monitored by the Architectural Review Commission and approved by them, and monitored by staff. We were very involved in the field work, the site work, and the eventual rehabilitation of the building, which hadn't been occupied in several years, so it had a substantial amount of work and is now home to a lovely family. So looking closely at the north end of the district, we can see how the local historic district boundary was on the north end was drawn to encompass largely the same area as the 1995 National Register listed district, but it was expanded in certain areas, like you see on the north, there we are, to capture the neighborhood more cohesively, allowing for the district standards to be applied consistently along the blocks. The local district also grew to include certain structures and some significant satellite sites, as I mentioned before, like the Gardner House on West Palm Avenue. And here, taking a closer look at the north end of the district, this was expanded to the north of the National Register District to partially for the purpose of including the Graham Bottling Works building, as well as being able to apply the standards consistently throughout the residential area. So this end of the district, however, also includes several vacant or underused parcels that are ripe for redevelopment currently, and we're seeing a lot of activity along Florida Avenue at this time. The current district boundary line cuts through multiple parcels in this area, and those that are along Florida Avenue are reflected on this map in green. As the area continues to redevelop, we're seeing more and more interest in these parcels. So what you're seeing here, just to kind of go through everything that's on this map, we have the local historic district boundary in red. Property parcels are in blue, so those are the individual properties with individual ownership throughout the area. The parcels that are kind of affected, that we're looking at closely, are those in green. This is where the boundary line for the Tampa Heights Local Historic District does not quite align with property parcels. And then I'm also showing you the platted lot lines from the original plats, and some of these go back to the late 19th century. And then you can also see the starred lots that show where some of the new construction has been. So you can see there's been some activity, definitely, in this area. As an example of some of the new redevelopment that we're seeing, in addition to the residential construction within the district, this is one of the lots that's split by the historic district boundary at 3101 North Florida Avenue. There is a rezoning going through the process right now, and it will actually be at a city council hearing this Thursday evening, but this particular project initially, and this is just the initial presentation, it's not what's actually represented for approval this week by council, but it initially presented a site plan on a parcel that had about 10 feet on the east side falling within the historic district. The plan's been altered since to remove the vertical construction from within the district boundary. But as initially presented, you can see that the building would have been partially subject to review by the Architectural Review Commission, presenting a challenge for the designers, wherein the design guidelines would only apply to part of their project. So therefore, one idea that the staff is considering is to adjust the district boundary to align with the parcel lines or the platted lot lines, removing the parcels that front Florida Avenue from the district in their entirety. You can see our potentially, well, an alternative, proposed alternative for the district boundary would be the green dashed line on the screen there. It gets a little busy, so I apologize for that, but we would be looking at basically adjusting the boundary line to be more consistent with the current ownerships along the that corridor. So, for our next steps, we have done a good deal of research, looking at what's out there in the field, kind of looking at the maps a little for analysis, and currently we have to do a little field work and community outreach, but while the inventory update to the map is a staff function that we present to the Historic Preservation Commission, we will be having to take the change in the district boundaries through a public hearing process that ultimately must be approved by City Council. So for the changes in the inventory, the usual map updates that we do and the ones that are a little more routine usually just come before you for approval and adoption. And the district boundary alignment, however, does have to have a full process wherein we do the community outreach, we bring it to you for your recommendation at a notice public hearing. The recommendation is reviewed by the Planning Commission staff, and then the changes to the boundary alignment will be presented to City Council at 2 noticed public hearings before the change to the map can be finally adopted. So, Tampa Heights is a very unique area in the city, and we enjoy working with it, and it's great many historic resources. So I'm available if you have questions regarding this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Yes. I'm sorry, I do have a question. That map that you showed, the last map, with the parcels, are those properties commercially zoned currently? The ones right along along Florida?
We have not looked at all of them for their zoning yet. I believe a lot of them are. A lot of them do have commercial uses on them currently. For example, the project that I provided for illustration purposes that's going through a rezoning right now is being rezoned to a planned development. So that's why it's going to City Council for approval.
I only ask because if they're commercially zoned and they don't have the historic district protection, which I see they don't really now, or only parcels of them, then then they're open to some of the Live Local Act height, or maybe, I don't know how far this is. They may be eligible to go to way higher heights than the current zoning allows, but anyway, just something to consider later as you're looking at it.
Certainly, thank you.
I think a good example of what composes those block faces, where that was the picture that Elaine showed earlier on Adderley, is, that was essentially a automobile storage yard that's been there for decades and was essentially sold off and then redeveloped into residential for that particular purpose. Mostly along Florida, where most of these parcels are either vacant or underutilized, so I anticipate that all of them will eventually convert over to some type of commercial or multifamily use. And just to ensure that if a PD comes in, even without, that 10% or 15% being within the historic district, the Historic Preservation Division can still comment on the PD because of the proximity of the site to the historic district. So we don't lose our ability to participate. What it does is clean up the fact that, a developer does not need to go to the ARC for that type of very, I think an ineffective degree of review. And the ARC doesn't have to try to juggle that very truncated type of review. I mean, we've had larger developments like Gasworks that were partially in the historic district and partially out, and there's kind of a clear demarcation line between, the third and the fourth building that you can utilize. But in this particular case, we didn't see that was really an option. So in bringing this to you today, we've been brainstorming on just how to do this without, causing unintended consequences to the boundaries. So we're open to any feedback that you have to just place that line in an area that makes sense for these types of reviews.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did have a question. Elaine, the picture with the dash lines, the green dash lines, Dennis kind of answered it. It was more of we're moving the boundary back. I would think that you would move it forward to encompass Florida, so it has so then aesthetically, but you said that even if Dennis said that even if the buildings are not within the boundaries, they still would consider designing things within the guidelines, right? So it doesn't look completely off. I was just thinking about the dash lines, why is it drawn back instead of forward? Is that because of owner consent or?
I think because the consistency of the map is primarily one block face off of Florida for that western elevation, except for just kind of the portion down to the very south around 7th Avenue. So we didn't see if you can only review just a portion of Florida Avenue, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, to get into a very involved and probably contested process with property owners that are looking to maximize development. Many of them own properties already. They bought them without the designation being in place. And to come in after the fact and do that, I think, would not be received very well. So I wasn't looking to cause any, and if someone does want that, for tax credits or whatever, we can certainly accommodate it, but it wasn't something that we were going to try to force without owner consent.
Oh, that makes sense. So then because a lot of the property, you said the lots on Florida Ave are empty, they're open for redevelopment. So because of the proximity to the district, they would consider, their design when they develop it, right?
Right, there'll still be design regulations put in place, or not the Tampa Heights historic guidelines, but we would take a position of ensuring that the development that's occurring in proximity to the historic district doesn't cause an adverse effect to the historic district. I imagine that most of these are going to be going through the PD process, just because they're sort of, obsolete uses that are on there, commercial general, but, with an industrial lean. So I think we're going to be seeing rezonings, and we have a system in place to participate in that process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Quick question on the commercial properties on Florida, whether there's anything that's formalized about the transitions, or whether it's more kind of, just kind of your prerogative as part of the design review, as part of the PD, or is there anything written into the design guidelines or in any of the zoning standards themselves about making transitions to the historic district?
There's not a specific language about transitioning into within the zoning code. It does give the historic preservation manager engagement with these processes, so that you have basically an administrative context that you can add to the request. The comp plan, the city county comp plan, does make references to proximities and areas of transitions, so sometimes we will utilize those as a means. Normally, in this particular situation, you're going to kind of be dealing with sort of the rear end of development as it approaches the historic district. So, we would be looking to make sure, just like with the one that Elaine featured that was on the screen last, that we don't end up with a dumpster and maybe active parking right up against the line where it just transitions to residential. So there would be buffering requirements and whatnot that are part of Chapter 27, but in a PD you can reduce those or waive those, and so we would just be making sure that those types of transitions were incorporated into the design plan. Any other questions? So we are going to be conducting the field work. One caveat of this particular project that we recognized early was, because we're going to be eventually bringing this to you for a recommendation and then bringing it to City Council to adjust the boundary line, that we needed to have a total update of the inventory within the Tampa Heights Historic District. So it kind of mushrooms the project a little bit. We're not just dealing with those 7 or 8 parcels on the northwest. We're dealing with inventorying and validating the entire district, which hasn't been done in almost 10 years. So we're going to be working on that and hopefully be able to bring you that before the end of the year. And with that, I'll move on to our last item if there's no questions. Oh, yeah.
Do we have any public comments? No public comment.
Okay. We have this on the PowerPoint for this one. Next, I'm going to be featuring a project. It's kind of like our preservation in progress mirrored, but it's an update on a rehabilitation and adaptive reuse for the George Guida Senior House, which is a local landmark in the city of Tampa and also listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The George Guida Senior House is a unique property located on the edge of McFarland Park in West Tampa. It is owned by the city of Tampa, but is actually situated within the boundaries of McFarland Park, so it's on parkland. And that has presented some challenges over the years for the reuse of this property, but we finally have made some headway on that, and I wanted to bring you up to date on the project. So the George Guida Senior House was constructed in 1952. Some people say 51. The son of Mr. Guida says 51, so I go with 51. It is the residential house of George Guida Sr., who was a prominent businessman and civic leader in West Tampa and had earned the moniker Mr. West Tampa. It's designed in the Art Modern architectural style by Mr. Guida and his architect Joseph P. Rodriguez. It was locally designated in 2005, and I'll say that this was truly one of the more community-generated designations. This site, when purchased by the city, wasn't really considered to be a historic site. It was a site that was sort of on the edge of McFarland Park, so it made sense for the city to acquire it. But it was really planned to be demolished, and a use was going to be put there, more civic use. So when that started to be developed, the community engaged with the city and signified that this building was worth saving, and began really a grassroots effort that involved many individuals and many organizations to not only preserve the structure, but to mothball it until a use could be determined. That next year was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, signifying not only the architectural elements of the building, but also the benefit of Mr. Guida's engagement in the community. This house was really more than just a residence. It became a gathering spot over the years, and a lot of the community remembers those gatherings and the hospitality of the Guida family. See the original photo. We don't have a date on this, but we do think it's from just the very early years of when the structure was constructed. It featured elements such as the long horizontal feature of the Art Moderne style, along with a rooftop patio. You can see the chimney featured a tall ship that was a mural that was painted on there. Much of the windows were either glass block, fixed windows, and then also there were some active patio windows in the rear of the house. Also the shapes of the windows, the round windows, different geometric shapes around the structure, in addition to the engaged carport, and then there was a small guest room off to the north side of the building. See the property as it was in 2006. This was a very challenging property to really identify a use for. It preceded the Barksdale Center, David Barksdale Center that's immediately next door, that's a city recreation facility, and wasn't really looked as being part of that facility and the programming of that particular area of the city. Over the years, there was a request for proposals that was issued a couple times. There were proposals that were presented to the city, but really all those proposals really were not very sensitive to the historic nature of the house. They required very dramatic floor plan changes or at-large additions that were overwhelming the house. So, none of the administrations prior to Mayor Castor really were able to identify a use that was compatible with the house. These pictures were taken just a few weeks ago when the driveway, including the original heart-shaped driveway, was reinstalled after a construction project in the area. The site has been cleaned up with large piles of trash removed, and construction staging was removed, and actually additional fencing now secures the property. We have had a problem with some vandalism over the years. In formatting a potential use within this particular building, we stepped back and looked at its location next to Barksdale and felt that it could almost be, a part of the Barksdale programming, but separate in how it necessarily functions. So we're looking at almost like an annex type to the Barksdale facility. The Barksdale's just north across the street of, I believe it's Main Street that runs east and west. And they do have adequate parking and actually overflow parking. which was one of the challenging components of redeveloping this site, is we did not want to end up with a use that added 100, 150 parking spaces onto the site, because it is still, as you can see, a very green and park-like setting. Also, we didn't want to disrupt the quaint rhythm of the house. The heart-shaped driveway obviously is something very unique to this property. It was installed by Mr. Guida as a symbol for his wife, his feelings for his wife, and has really become almost the icon of the property. Everybody knows the heart-shaped driveway. In addition to the logistics of parking, which we feel can be handled by collaborating with Barksdale, we're also looking at introducing the Parks and Recreation staff as the entity that will oversee this property in programming and operations. They have the experience to do that, and they already have their processes in place for Barksdale. What made sense in this particular property is we went out to the community and began to talk with the citizens of West Tampa, talk to those in the public that were promoting the preservation of this, was that they felt it was very necessary to have this be accessible to the public, because the Guidas were very hospitable with their property. They had many gatherings, weddings, anniversaries, birthdays. Civic leaders spoke at the house when they were vying for different elected offices. And Mr. Guida was very active in the community. Aside from being a general contractor, he also owned a home goods store in West Tampa that sold a lot of home finishes. Before there was a Lowe's or a Home Depot or Amazon, you had to let George do it. And this is George Guida Sr. Interesting, this picture was provided to us by his family, which we are very grateful to have been working with them and ensuring that the details of the house's restoration reflects really not only what was there may be missing, but also sort of the spirit of the family. What's interesting about this was located in a living area and was obviously Mr. Guida's workspace. It was removed at some point, I believe before the property was sold. And Mr. Guida's son did request that we kind of pay homage to that, because it was sort of a central area of how life was lived in the house. And so what we have decided to do in working with the architect is recreate this desk and its backdrop as essentially a component of that particular room. And we're going to modify it somewhat to have audiovisual capabilities and speakers, and so that people can not people, but the community can display artifacts and show movies or verbal interviews that were done by different components of the preservation community in Ybor, or in West Tampa. So we are working on kind of taking those images and bringing them back to maybe not in their original purpose, but in a way that pays homage to it. And fortunately, we were entrusted with a lot of these photos that kind of show the house over the years. You can see on the upper right the tall ship that was painted in a recessed area on the back of the chimney. That's going to be recreated. Unfortunately, it's basically faded away with time. These areas along there was a small little stage in one of the rooms that you see here in the main living room, which is being modified but retained. And we've used some of the pictures, like the image from the holiday scene in the lower left, to identify the species of trees and plants that were on site, so that we can recreate that and reinstall some of that same landscaping that was very different than it is today. Working with the Parks Department and with Logistics and Asset Management, who runs our facilities, We've been collaborating on being able to make this transition to an adaptive reuse, which would essentially, on the main level, be a gathering space for events. It'll be a smaller gathering space than what you could achieve like in Barksdale or a larger facility, but it'll be respective to the size and the layout of the structure. We are not going to add additional space, but we're going to convert existing spaces to the needs of the project, including accessible bathrooms and ramps that would provide access and really try to recapture the flavor of it as a residence within the West Tampa area. These are some of the existing conditions as they are. That stage on the left was the images that we were just looking at. You can see in the rear that it's a combination of glass block and jalousie windows in the center, which unfortunately we can't replace now, but we can mimic in the configuration of the windows. On the right, part of the kitchen area and part of the dining room are on a radius. So we are preserving all of the tile and the cabinetry, and there will have to be some reproduction in certain areas where there's been some vandalism in the past. But our goal is to retain as much of these historic features. Would not be a functional kitchen, but it will be there as a reference. Some of the work that's been done to date did include the replacement of the roof and the roofing structure to meet current code. So as you see this picture, you can see the new roof structure was really the most paramount thing that we had to accomplish, was to keep the building watertight. And in doing so, we discovered a number of things that had to be addressed structurally as we went through that process. In the living room, you see the main tile surround of the fireplace. That desk that I was pointing out, that Mr. Guido was sitting at in the historic picture, would have been just to the right of that fireplace. This is a mural that's on the inside sunroom of the house. It is still in place. Does not have that date on the bottom of it. That's just our camera. But it does represent the original house, heart-shaped driveway, as you can see. Some of the color patterns that were originally on the house. And you can even make out that ship that's up there on the rooftop. The rooftop does have railings that surround it, and historically it was used as a gathering space for some parties. We're not going to be able to accomplish that in our current environment for a number of reasons, egress being a main one. But we will be restoring it back to its original look, and also repairing anything on the chimney itself that needs attention. Luckily, we were able to obtain the original drawings from the family, which had a lot of the original handwritten notes. I'm told that Mr. Guida did these drawings himself. Interestingly enough, this site was the original location for Hugh McFarland's house. He did not end up building the house, but he had built a basement in it when Mr. Guida acquired it from the family. So Mr. Guida kept the basement and added a two-story house above it. The basement still exists and will be part of the use process as we get into being able to offer catering services and whatnot at the house for events. There were changes made to these original drawings, but the detail and the specifications, the measurements are very accurate, and so we have been relying on these for the restoration of some of the elements. So just a few things to touch on. First of all, I think it's important to begin with just the collaboration with the city's administration and city council. I think everyone that I've talked to is really excited about this project. It's something in West Tampa that's been a long time coming, and we're very happy that the administration was supportive of our proposal to to adapt it into a more public use. We have, obviously, you see the enhanced fence there in the front. There's actually 2 fences around it right now. Installed security lights, an alarm system in the house to monitor it during construction. We've consulted with mural experts, conservators, to preserve both the house mural and restore the chimney mural. We have great photos of that, so we don't see that that's going to be an issue. There is tile damage in the house, which will need to be repaired, but also we're preserving one of the main restrooms with some very elaborate tile work and inlaid artwork. So we are going to be relying upon them as well for that restoration process. We've conducted a great deal of research to replace damaged and missing historic materials. We are working with Wilder Architecture, who is a very well-established historic preservation architectural firm, and they have been excellent in being able to identify some of the materials that would be compatible with this structure. The drawings are currently, really, they're almost at 100%. When I did this presentation, they were at 90%, but we're basically in permitting now and expect to receive our permit any day now. We've assembled a very well-versed restoration team with Johnson & Lux of the general contractor, and then some supporting restoration contractors as well, such as Specialized. We salvage for reuse any architecturally significant interior features that can either be reused or used to replicate the original. So that would include trim, doors. Some of the walls, as you can see, are rounded on the house, so we have rounded trim, the radius trim that goes on those areas that will have to be either reapplied or reproduced. As I said, we did replace the roof. They have completed the selective demolition. I was in there yesterday, so basically the areas that need to have access for structural improvements are now exposed, and part of the building has been sort of reinforced to ensure that while those repairs are going on, there's no shifting of elements. Ongoing work is occurring daily on site, and we are looking forward to really seeing this house make some progress for the remainder of this year into next year, and then hopefully having the ability to do a ribbon cutting prior to Mayor Castor leaving office next year. I mentioned some of the use you see in the upper right, or the upper photograph. These are kind of preliminary floor plans. They've developed a little bit differently now. But the upstairs, which was composed of 3 bedrooms, the parents' bedrooms and then the sons' and the daughters' bedrooms on each, kind of separating them on each side, has been identified for reuse as office space. Whether that's community-based office space or city office space, that hasn't been worked out yet, but the 3 bedrooms will be essentially converted into 3 offices. And the plan is to have that engage with the community so that they're able to enter the property, throughout the day, even if there's not an event going on there. The main level, as I said, does constitute a gathering space. So that main living room area where the stage was will be one gathering space. We're calling that community area 1. There will be ADA accessible entry into that portion, as well as, so that would be the green portion on the lower part of the floor plan, as well as the blue areas. There are a couple areas that are not going to be accessible to ADA because of just accessibility limitations. One of those is, of course, the basement. And then there's a small sunroom in the back that has stairs leading into it and out of it. One element that was looked at was the porte-cochere, which is just to the right of that lower level floor plan. That is an exterior area. where we're going to be enclosing that with a nano wall system so that it can be conditioned spaced and used as a second community room. And then that small little apartment that was off to the right on the north side is going to be converted into ADA bathrooms. A major, obviously with the basement, that gives us some ability. That is a more staff accessible area that'll be used essentially for food prep and distribution for events. In addition to the interior spaces, the house features I think a very ahead of its time outdoor kitchen and gathering space that had a barbecue and coolers and sinks and everything for entertaining outdoors, not in July or August. But it has a unique cracked patio, cracked tile patio, and some interesting architectural features that were added on these different structures that Mr. Guida had incorporated or that his wife suggested. So some of the images that we're looking at, this is one of the early renderings of the property. You can see what we were trying to exhibit here was the way that a very gradually sloped ramp could be added. That actually 90 degrees then up to the main entry, so that we can ensure as much access to the property. It has split level floors throughout, so there's a lot of ups and downs that need to be sort of managed through these different ramps. This is an image of the rear where you can see the outdoor patio area and a second ramp that will lead into community space 1 that will provide access into and from that room. And then the restoration of the outdoor area. We do think that this is going to be a very desirable location for outdoor events, and we have left room on site in case tents have to be placed. So if they want to do a larger event, that can accommodate that as well. This is moving towards sort of the rear. That would be a view to the east from the back. That outdoor patio area would be on your right side. And then the center behind the gentleman on the bike is a sunroom. Beyond that wall in the back is where that mural is that will be restored. And then you see the carport area with its glazing, so it still keeps its relationship of being a void on the spacing of the house, but does provide the ability for us to add more usable space, more conditioned space, and ensure that the property is a little bit better secured. And another angle opposite of that perspective from the front side, you see the restoration of the windows, the restoration of the exterior, and just really a holistic approach of bringing this property back to use for a new purpose, but really with the same spirit that has been known to the community throughout the years. This is an early example of the interior community space 1. What will occur in here will be smaller gatherings with sort of flexible spaces for furniture, for open spaces. And interestingly enough, you see the lighted soffit across the ceiling. That existed historically. That's in place. And so we are restoring that. We're taking out the fluorescent tubes and converting that over to LED, but it will be the same effect that the Guidas enjoyed while they occupied the house as well. So tomorrow there will be a kickoff celebration at the George Guida Senior House for the restoration project that I just summarized for you. It begins at 10:30. I did include some invitations for you in your packets if you're able to join us. The mayor will be revealing the final artist illustrations of the house, as well as Councilman Maniscalco providing some of his experiences and remembrances of the Guida family. And Mr. Guida's son, George Guida, will be there as well to talk about his family and celebrate the progress that's being made, as well as many in the community who are just very excited about this. So If you are available, we'd love to see you, and if not, we will definitely keep you informed of this project along the way. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you guys for your work. That's a beautiful building. I just automatically thought wedding. So that'll be a great wedding venue. And then I saw the back with the pit, and I said, even better. And you can put tents.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a beautiful building. I really like or appreciate the carport section, because it's like, even though it's an enclosed space, you can tell what it was originally.
Right.
So people there, even if they're not like architecturally informed, they'd be like, oh, this would be a good carport space. So I like how you, how the designers really thought about ways to honor the building as it was originally built, but use it for today's use. So thank you for that,
Right.
your work.
Thank you. So that does conclude our items on the agenda.
Do we have any more?
I have no comment, thank you.
Okay.
Any public comment?
That does conclude our items on the agenda. I would like to get a motion just to receive and file these presentations. The date of our next meeting is September 15th, 2026. We will have a new commissioner joining us on that date. He is going through the appointment process now. Jerry Hosey is his name, and he is an attorney. So he's very excited to get going, and he was just appointed last Thursday, so we haven't been able to do his orientation and everything quite yet, but he'll definitely be here in September. And in September, I do anticipate having some action items for you. Some of these processes take a little bit of time to put together, but we are working with a couple property owners right now who are looking to locally designate their properties, so you can expect to see that soon.
In continuation, I wish to make a motion to receive and file submitted documents and exhibits presented today.
Anybody would second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you.
And that, okay, so the public hearing for the Historic Preservation Commission has been adjourned at 10:12 a.m.
Thank you.